If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge. And when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. Chapter 1, A Kingdom on the Brink, the Early Cholas and Rajaraja's Rise. Part 1, Shadows of the Past, the Tumultuous Lineage of the Cholas. The Chola dynasty had once commanded respect across the Tamil lands, but by the 9th century, their glory had faded into a distant memory. What remained was a fragmented kingdom, struggling to survive against powerful enemies who circled like vultures around weakened prey. For generations, the Cholas had fought bitter wars against their neighbors. The Pallavas from the northeast pressed down with their disciplined armies, while the Pandyas from the south launched constant raids into Chola territory. From the western Deccan, the mighty Rashtrakutas swept down with cavalry forces that could devastate entire regions in weeks. Each war drained the Chola treasury and scattered their forces across too many fronts. The kingdom's troubles went deeper than external threats. Inside the royal palaces, brothers killed brothers for the throne. Succession disputes became so common that many nobles stopped caring who ruled, knowing the next king might die within months. Regional governors began acting like independent rulers, keeping taxes for themselves and ignoring orders from the capital. The great ports that had once made the Cholas wealthy fell into disrepair. Tamil merchants watched helplessly as foreign traders took over sea routes their ancestors had controlled. The famous Chola navy, which had once protected merchant fleets across the Bay of Bengal, could barely defend the coastline near home. Ships rotted in harbors, while skilled sailors found work with other kingdoms. Villages across the Chola heartland told stories of better times, when their kings had built magnificent temples and sponsored grand festivals. Now, many temples stood empty because there was no money for priests or celebrations. The cultural pride that had once united Tamil people under Chola leadership began to crumble as neighboring dynasties claimed to be the true protectors of Tamil traditions. By the mid-10th century, the situation had become desperate. The Chola homeland around Tanjavur looked more like a collection of warring villages than the center of an ancient empire. Young princes grew up knowing their ancestors had ruled vast territories, but seeing only defeat and retreat during their own lifetimes. This was the world into which Arulmozhi Varman was born. The future Rajaraja Chola I entered a dynasty where survival mattered more than ambition, where the throne meant inheriting problems rather than power. Yet from this chaos and decline would emerge one of India's greatest rulers. The very struggles that weakened his predecessors would teach him lessons about leadership, loyalty, and the careful balance between strength and wisdom. The stage was set for an extraordinary transformation. A crumbling kingdom awaited a leader who could not only restore its former glory, but surpass it entirely. Part 2, Birth of Arulmozhi Varman, Promise in the Crisis. In the year 947 CE, as monsoon rains lashed the stone walls of Thanjavur Palace, a prince was born who would change the course of Indian history. Arulmozhi Varman entered a world where his own family's survival hung by a thread. His father, Parantaka Chola II, ruled over a kingdom that enemies circled like vultures around wounded prey. The palace corridors whispered with danger. Older princes had died under mysterious circumstances. Some said poison, others blamed enemy assassins who moved freely through the Chola court. Arulmozhi's mother, Vanavan Mahadevi, kept her youngest son close, teaching him that in their world, trust was a luxury few could afford. His father bore the weight of constant warfare. The Pandyas pressed from the south, while Rashtrakuta armies threatened from the north. Trade routes that once filled royal coffers now lay empty. Merchant ships feared to sail under Chola protection, knowing pirates ruled the seas their ancestors had once commanded. Young Arulmozhi watched his father age rapidly under these pressures. Court meetings stretched late into the night as ministers debated whether to fight or flee. The prince learned to read faces in shadows, to understand which nobles remained loyal and which already planned their escape to enemy camps. His sister Kundavai became his closest companion and wisest teacher. 5 years older, she possessed a sharp mind that cut through palace intrigue like a blade through silk. She taught him that power meant nothing without the wisdom to use it correctly. Together, they studied the mistakes of their predecessors, learning how pride and hasty decisions had cost the Cholas their empire. The deaths of his elder brothers thrust Arulmozhi into succession talks he never expected to join. Palace astrologers proclaimed favorable stars at his birth, but the prince knew that survival required more than celestial blessing. He trained with weapons at dawn, studied statecraft by day, and learned to move silently through palace halls by night. Military commanders noticed the young prince's unusual composure during crisis meetings. While others panicked at news of enemy advances, Arulmozhi asked practical questions about supply lines, troop morale, and defensive positions. His tutors marveled at his ability to absorb lessons about taxation, diplomacy, and naval strategy with equal intensity. The kingdom teetered on collapse, but something stirred within its royal household. A prince was growing into manhood, shaped by chaos but not broken by it. His education came not from scrolls alone, but from watching his dynasty fight for its very existence. This crucible of early hardship forged qualities that would soon transform a struggling kingdom into an empire that would dominate the Indian Ocean. The boy who learned survival in a crumbling palace would become the man who built temples that touched the sky. Part 3. The Turbulent Road to the Throne. The death of Rajaraja Chola II left the kingdom at a crossroads. His brother Uttama Chola claimed the throne, passing over the young prince Arulmozhi Varman. Many expected bloodshed. Royal succession disputes had torn apart kingdoms across South India for generations. Ambitious princes often met their end in palace corridors, victims of poison or midnight daggers. But Arulmozhi made a choice that surprised everyone. He bowed before his uncle and pledged complete loyalty. This decision saved his life and changed the course of Chola history. Instead of plotting rebellion, the prince became Uttama's most trusted general. He led armies against the Pandyas in the south and the Cheras in the west. Each victory strengthened his reputation while proving his devotion to the dynasty. The court whispered about the prince's strange behavior. Why would a rightful heir surrender his claim so easily? Some called him weak. Others suspected he was playing a longer game. Arulmozhi remained silent about his true intentions. He trained with his soldiers, studied enemy tactics, and built relationships with commanders throughout the kingdom. Under Uttama's rule, the Chola Kingdom slowly regained its footing. The constant warfare that had plagued earlier reigns gave way to more organized campaigns. Arulmozhi's military successes pushed back Pandya forces and secured vital trade routes. His strategic mind impressed veteran generals who had served under multiple kings. They began to see him not as a displaced prince, but as a future leader. Years passed. Uttama Chola's reign brought stability, but he produced no male heirs. The question of succession loomed once again. This time, however, there was no confusion. Arulmozhi had earned his place through service rather than birth alone. His loyalty had transformed potential enemies into supporters. When Uttama died in 985 CE, the transition happened smoothly. No rival claimants emerged from the shadows. No assassins struck in the night. The prince who had once stepped aside for his uncle now stepped forward to claim his destiny. The coronation of Rajaraja Chola marked the end of the kingdom's turbulent period and the beginning of its golden age. This peaceful succession was almost unheard of in medieval South India. Most throne changes involved violence, betrayal, or civil war. Rajaraja's patient approach had preserved both his life and the kingdom's unity. The lessons learned during those years of loyal service would guide his legendary reign. A prince who had mastered the art of waiting was ready to build an empire. Part 4. Seeds of Renewal. Restoring order and unity. The crown sat heavy on Rajaraja's head, but heavier still was the weight of expectation. The kingdom he inherited in 985 CE was like a wounded lion, still dangerous, but bleeding from years of conflict and neglect. The new king understood that grand conquests meant nothing if his own house remained divided. Before he could dream of distant shores, he needed to fix what was broken at home. The royal treasury told a troubling story. Tax collection had become erratic under previous rulers. Regional chieftains had grown bold, keeping revenues for themselves while offering empty promises of loyalty. Some districts hadn't sent proper tribute in years. Rajaraja knew that without steady income, his armies would remain weak and his ambitions would crumble like sandcastles at high tide. He moved swiftly to reorganize the revenue system. New tax collectors, personally chosen for their loyalty, replaced the old guard. The king divided his territory into smaller, manageable units, each overseen by officials who reported directly to the capital. These administrators knew their positions depended entirely on honest service. Within months, gold began flowing into the royal coffers again. The military presented an even greater challenge. Years of defensive warfare had left the Chola forces demoralized and poorly equipped. Rajaraja understood that an army's strength came not just from numbers, but from belief in victory. He increased soldier pay, improved weapons and armor, and most importantly, began leading training exercises himself. When common soldiers saw their king wielding a sword alongside them, their spirits lifted. Regional rebellions demanded immediate attention. Several Tamil chieftains had used the previous regime's weakness to carve out independent territories. Rajaraja chose his battles carefully. He crushed the most dangerous rebels quickly and publicly, making examples that sent clear messages. But he also offered generous terms to those who submitted voluntarily. Fear and mercy, applied in equal measure, brought most dissidents back into line. The ports required urgent repair. Trade had suffered as Chola naval power declined, allowing rival kingdoms to control crucial sea routes. Rajaraja ordered shipyards rebuilt and harbors dredged. He negotiated new agreements with merchant guilds, promising protection in exchange for higher customs duties. Soon, ships bearing the tiger flag of the Cholas were visible in waters they hadn't patrolled for decades. Perhaps most cleverly, Rajaraja revived temple patronage on a massive scale. He commissioned new temples and renovated old ones, employing thousands of craftsmen and earning the gratitude of priests and common people alike. These religious centers became symbols of Chola renewal, rallying both political and spiritual support for the dynasty. Within 5 years, the transformation was remarkable. A kingdom that had seemed ready to fragment now pulsed with renewed energy. Trade flourished, rebellions ended, and the military grew confident once more. Rajaraja had built the foundation upon which his legendary conquests would rest. Chapter 2: Rise of the Sea King, Naval Power and Military Campaigns. Part 1: Reforming the Army and Forging the Navy. Rajaraja knew that ruling the Tamil lands was not enough. The vast Indian Ocean stretched before him, filled with Arab traders, Chinese merchants, and Southeast Asian kingdoms competing for the same profitable sea routes. If the Cholas wanted to control trade between India and the outside world, they needed more than brave soldiers on land. They needed ships that could fight and win on the open sea. The young king looked at his father's army and saw its weaknesses. The soldiers were brave, but they fought in old ways. The navy existed, but it was small and weak. Enemy kingdoms like the Cheras had better ships and more experienced sailors. Arab merchants sailed past Chola ports without paying proper tribute. This had to change. Rajaraja began transforming his military from the ground up. He divided his army into specialized groups. Some soldiers trained only with swords and shields. Others learned to use bows and arrows with deadly accuracy. The cavalry practiced coordinated charges on horseback. Each group perfected their skills until they moved like one body with many parts. But the real revolution happened at the coast. Rajaraja ordered the construction of massive shipyards along the Kaveri River and the eastern seaboard. Skilled craftsmen worked day and night, building warships larger and stronger than any seen before in these waters. These were not simple fishing boats with a few armed men. These were floating fortresses designed for war. The king recruited experienced sailors from fishing communities and merchant families. He brought in foreign experts who knew the secrets of naval warfare. Young nobles learned to command ships alongside humble fishermen who knew every current and wind pattern. For the first time, the Cholas had a permanent navy that could challenge any enemy on the sea. Training became intense and disciplined. Soldiers practiced coordinated attacks, where army units and naval forces worked together. They rehearsed landing operations, where ships would deliver troops to enemy beaches while providing cover with arrows and spears. The integration of land and sea forces created a military machine unlike anything their enemies had faced. The investment paid off quickly. Chola ships began patrolling trade routes, collecting taxes from foreign merchants. They escorted Chola traders to distant ports, protecting them from pirates and hostile kingdoms. The navy became a source of wealth as well as power. Other kingdoms watched nervously as Chola warships multiplied. The balance of power in the Indian Ocean was shifting. What had once been open waters contested by many now showed signs of coming under one ruler's control. Rajaraja's military reforms created more than just a stronger army and navy. They forged the tools needed to build an empire that would stretch across the sea itself. With these forces ready, the king could now turn his attention to his first major target, the proud naval base of Kandalur, where his enemies felt safe behind their own ships and fortifications. Part 2. The Assault on Kandalur and Domination of Malabar. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Malabar coast as Rajaraja's war fleet approached Kandalur Salai. This wasn't just another port town. Kandalur stood as the crown jewel of Chera naval power, a fortress that had never fallen to enemy attack. Its massive wooden docks stretched into deep waters, sheltering hundreds of war vessels that controlled the pepper trade from the Western Ghats to distant Arab ports. For generations, the Cheras had grown rich from this single advantage. Every merchant ship seeking the precious spices of Malabar paid tribute to Kandalur's harbor masters. Every rival kingdom that dared challenge Chera authority faced the full fury of ships launched from these very docks. The fortress had become a symbol of Chera pride, seemingly impregnable behind its coral reefs and trained naval defenders. Rajaraja understood what Kandalur represented. As long as this base remained in enemy hands, the Cholas would never control the full circuit of Indian Ocean trade. The Cheras could always threaten Chola merchant vessels, demand tribute from Tamil traders, and maintain their claim as equals in the southern seas. The king had spent months planning this assault, knowing that success here would shift the balance of maritime power forever. The attack came at dawn, when most defenders still slept. Chola ships had moved through the night, guided by captured fishermen who knew the treacherous coral passages. The element of surprise proved devastating. Before Chera commanders could organize proper resistance, Chola Marines had already breached the harbor defenses and set fire to the wooden docks. What followed was less a battle than a systematic destruction. Chola forces targeted not just the military installations, but the entire infrastructure that made Kandalur a trading hub. Warehouses filled with pepper and cardamom went up in flames. The great shipyard where Chera vessels were built became a smoking ruin. Most critically, the harbor itself was rendered useless through deliberate sabotage of its channels and moorings. The psychological impact rippled far beyond the immediate destruction. News of Kandalur's fall spread quickly along the coast, carried by fleeing merchants and terrified survivors. For the first time in centuries, the mighty Chera navy had suffered a crushing defeat. Other coastal rulers who had relied on Chera protection suddenly found themselves exposed and vulnerable. Rajaraja wasted no time consolidating his victory. Within weeks, Chola administrators arrived to establish new trading posts along the Malabar coast. The king's inscriptions, carved into temple walls across his territory, proclaimed a new reality. The Cholas now controlled both eastern and western sea routes of southern India. This triumph at Kandalur marked the beginning of an unstoppable expansion. With the Arabian Sea trade routes now under Chola influence, Rajaraja possessed the resources and strategic position needed for even grander ambitions. The inland kingdoms of Tamil country, witnessing this display of naval supremacy, would soon discover that their old rival had become something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Part 3. War against the Pandya and Chera kingdoms, unifying Tamilakam. With their naval dominance established across both coasts, Rajaraja's gaze turned inward to the Tamil heartland itself. The time had come to settle old scores and complete what generations of Chola kings had only dreamed of achieving. The Pandya kingdom to the south had remained the most stubborn thorn in Chola ambitions for centuries, their rulers alternately allying with and fighting against Tanjavur in an endless cycle of warfare. The Pandya capital at Madurai gleamed with ancient temples and bustling markets, but its walls would soon face the full weight of Chola military might. Rajaraja understood that naval victories meant nothing. Its rival kings could still challenge his authority from within Tamil country itself. The Pandyas commanded fertile lands, controlled important trade routes through southern Tamil Nadu, and possessed enough wealth to fund armies that could threaten Chola expansion. Rajaraja's campaign against the Pandyas began with calculated precision. His reformed army, now battle-tested from coastal victories, moved south in coordinated columns. Unlike previous Chola-Pandya conflicts that often devolved into seasonal raids, this would be a war of complete conquest. Chola forces surrounded key Pandya strongholds, cutting off supply lines and isolating garrison towns from mutual support. The siege of Madurai became the defining moment of this campaign. Rajaraja's engineers deployed new siege techniques learned from studying foreign military methods, while his navy prevented any seaborne reinforcements from reaching the besieged capital. After months of relentless pressure, the Pandya king finally surrendered his crown, ending centuries of independent Pandya rule. The Chera kingdom faced similar systematic dismantling. Already weakened by the earlier loss of Kandalur and other coastal strongholds, the Chera rulers found themselves fighting a two-front war they could not win. Chola armies pressed from the east, while the navy controlled every port that might offer escape or resupply. One by one, Chera fortresses fell to Chola siegecraft and superior organization. With both rival kingdoms defeated, Rajaraja claimed the ancient title of Mummudi Cholar, ruler of the three crowned kingdoms of Tamil country. This was no mere ceremonial designation, but represented genuine political transformation. For the first time in centuries, all of Tamilakam acknowledged a single authority. The king moved quickly to consolidate these gains. Former Pandya and Chera nobles who submitted received positions in the expanded Chola administration, while those who resisted faced exile or worse. Loyal governors replaced enemy kings, backed by permanent Chola garrisons that could respond swiftly to any rebellion. This unification created something unprecedented in Tamil history: a stable, unified homeland that could support massive military ventures without fear of attacks from behind. Trade flowed freely across former boundaries, temple construction boomed, and agricultural production soared under unified administration. Most importantly, Rajaraja now possessed the secure base necessary for his next ambitious goal, projecting Chola power far beyond Tamil shores into the vast Indian Ocean itself. Part 4. The Lankan Campaign, Anuradhapura Falls and beyond. With Tamil land secure under his rule, Rajaraja Chola set his sights across the narrow waters separating his kingdom from the golden island of Lanka. The conquest of Sri Lanka represented more than territorial expansion. Control of the Palk Strait meant dominating one of the busiest sea routes in the Indian Ocean, while Lanka's fertile lands produced precious gems, pearls, and spices that filled royal treasuries across Asia. The Chola king understood that Lanka's conquest required perfect coordination between his newly strengthened navy and battle-tested army. Months of preparation saw war elephants loaded onto specially built transport ships, while cavalry units practiced amphibious landings along the Tamil coast. Rajaraja's admirals mapped every inlet and harbor on Lanka's northern shores, identifying the fastest routes to Anuradhapura, the island's ancient capital. When the invasion fleet finally crossed the strait, Sinhalese defenders found themselves overwhelmed by the scale and precision of the attack. Chola warships appeared simultaneously at multiple ports, while land forces advanced rapidly inland, cutting off escape routes for enemy armies. The coordination was flawless as coastal fortresses fell to naval bombardment. Cavalry units swept through the countryside, preventing organized resistance. The siege of Anuradhapura itself became the stuff of legend. For over 1,000 years, this magnificent city had served as the heart of Sinhalese civilization, its towering stupas and sacred Bodhi tree marking it as Buddhism's most holy site outside India. Yet when Chola war elephants thundered through its gates and Rajaraja's soldiers occupied its palaces, the city's long reign as an independent capital ended abruptly. Local rulers who submitted quickly found themselves incorporated into the Chola administrative system, their lands governed by Tamil officials, but their positions preserved. Those who resisted faced exile or death, their territories redistributed to loyal supporters. The northern third of Lanka became a Chola province, complete with Tamil-speaking administrators and permanent garrisons. But Rajaraja viewed Lankan conquest as just the beginning. The island's strategic position made it the perfect staging ground for further naval expeditions into the vast Indian Ocean. Its ports could repair and resupply Chola fleets heading toward the Maldives, Lakshadweep, or even the distant shores of Southeast Asia. What had once been an enemy stronghold now served as the forward base for an expanding maritime empire. From the captured palace of Anuradhapura, Rajaraja could see his next targets clearly. Beyond Lanka's southern tip lay the coral atolls and trading posts that controlled the ocean's most valuable shipping lanes. The Sea King's ambitions had grown with each victory, and now nothing less than mastery of the entire Indian Ocean would satisfy his imperial dreams. Part 5. Overseas Conquests, Lakshadweep, the Maldives, and the Indian Ocean Empire. With Lanka secured, Rajaraja's gaze swept across the vast waters stretching toward the horizon. His admirals brought him maps showing scattered dots of coral islands far from any coast. These tiny specks seemed insignificant, but the Sea King understood their true value. Every merchant ship crossing the Indian Ocean needed fresh water, food, and shelter from storms. Control these islands, and you control the ocean itself. The Lakshadweep Islands lay northwest of Kerala, a chain of coral atolls where Arab merchants had long stopped to repair their vessels. Rajaraja's spies reported that these islands served as meeting points for traders carrying gold from Africa, horses from Arabia, and spices from his own domains. Local chiefs collected tribute from passing ships, but they answered to no great power. This made them perfect targets for Chola expansion. The naval expedition that set sail from Tamil ports was unlike anything the Indian Ocean had seen. Hundreds of ships carried not just warriors, but administrators, craftsmen, and tax collectors. Rajaraja had learned from his Lankan campaign that conquest meant nothing without proper governance. When the Chola fleet appeared on the horizon, the island chiefs faced an impossible choice. Resistance meant destruction by the most powerful navy in Asian waters. Submission offered protection and prosperity under Chola rule. Most islands surrendered without battle, The chiefs who submitted found themselves richly rewarded, their positions secure as long as they served Chola interests faithfully. Those who resisted discovered that coral atolls offered little defense against determined attackers. Within months, every major island flew the tiger banner of the Cholas. The Maldives presented a greater challenge. These islands stretched across hundreds of miles of ocean, their people skilled sailors who had traded independently for centuries. But Rajaraja had patience and overwhelming force. His admirals established bases in captured islands, then systematically worked their way through the entire chain. Each conquest brought new intelligence about sea routes, seasonal winds, and hidden harbors. Success in these distant waters transformed the Chola Kingdom into something entirely new. Tribute flowed from island chiefs who had never heard of Thanjavur just years before. Chola merchants established trading posts thousands of miles from home, protected by the empire's naval might. Foreign kings from Burma to Bengal sent envoys bearing gifts, acknowledging Rajaraja's dominance over the sea lanes their own traders depended upon. The economic impact was immediate. Every ship crossing between Arabia and Southeast Asia now paid fees to Chola officials. This ocean toll system generated wealth that dwarfed traditional land taxes. The islands themselves produced coconuts, dried fish, and cowrie shells used as currency across much of Asia. More importantly, they provided secure harbors where Chola warships could patrol indefinitely, projecting power across the entire Indian Ocean. From his palace in Thanjavur, Rajaraja now commanded an empire spanning thousands of miles of water. His next challenge would be defending this vast maritime domain while continuing his ambitious building projects at home. Chapter 3: Glory and Devotion, The Age of Temple Building. Part 1: Vision from War, The Dream to Build Rajarajeshwaram. After each crushing victory across distant lands, something profound began stirring in Rajaraja's heart. As his armies marched through conquered territories, the emperor found himself drawn not just to battlefield strategies, but to the towering temples that dotted the landscape. In Ceylon's ancient cities, he studied the soaring dagobas that pierced the sky. Among the Pandya ruins, he examined carved pillars that spoke of vanished glory. Each sacred structure whispered lessons about power made permanent in stone. The emperor was a devoted follower of Shiva, the cosmic dancer who destroys and creates worlds. During quiet moments between campaigns, Rajaraja would pray at local shrines, offering gratitude for divine protection. But increasingly, he felt called to build something greater than any temple his eyes had witnessed. His victories were gifts from Shiva, and such generosity demanded an offering worthy of the god who ruled over destruction and renewal. Back in Thanjavur, his capital city, Rajaraja summoned his most trusted advisors. Master architects arrived with scrolls and measuring tools. Court astrologers calculated auspicious dates and divine alignments. Religious scholars debated sacred geometry and proper proportions. The emperor described his vision with burning intensity. This would be no ordinary temple, but a monument that would make rival kingdoms tremble with awe. Rajaraja intended his temple to serve multiple purposes. Yes, it would honor Shiva with unmatched devotion, but it would also demonstrate Chola wealth to visiting ambassadors and neighboring rulers. Every massive stone would whisper of engineering mastery. Every carved sculpture would proclaim artistic supremacy. The temple would rise so high that sailors approaching from distant seas would spot its peak before glimpsing the shore. The emperor linked this sacred project directly to his military triumphs. Just as his armies had conquered lands across the ocean, his temple would conquer hearts and minds through spiritual magnificence. He would name it Rajarajeshwaram, literally meaning the temple of the King of Kings. The very name declared his ambition to outshine all previous rulers in both worldly achievement and divine devotion. Religious advisors helped weave deeper meanings into the design. The temple would become a cosmic mountain where heaven touched earth. Its towering spire would align with celestial movements. Sacred geometry would govern every measurement, creating harmony between human craft and divine order. Thousands of sculptures would tell stories of gods and heroes, turning granite walls into teaching tools for future generations. Rajaraja also envisioned his temple as an administrative center where religious festivals would double as political gatherings. During major celebrations, subjects from across his empire would witness Chola power displayed through magnificent rituals. The temple would store royal treasures, manage vast estates, and employ armies of priests, dancers, musicians, and craftsmen. This sacred space would pulse with both spiritual energy and imperial authority. The planning took months of intense collaboration. When the final blueprints emerged, they revealed something unprecedented in scale and ambition. This temple would not merely serve the present, but stand as an eternal testament to Rajaraja's reign, ready to inspire wonder in generations yet unborn. Part 2. 7 Years of Stone. Epic construction of Brihadeeswara. When construction began at Tanjavur, the site transformed into the largest workshop South India had ever seen. Chief architect Kunjara Malan Rajaraja Perunthachan stood at the center of this massive operation, directing thousands of workers with the precision of a military commander. The king had given him 7 years to complete what many considered impossible. The first challenge was stone. Teams of workers traveled to granite quarries 30 miles away, where they cut blocks weighing up to 80 tons each. These massive stones had to be moved without modern machinery. Workers built earthen ramps and used wooden rollers, elephants, and hundreds of men pulling ropes. The journey from quarry to temple site took weeks for each block. At the construction site, different teams worked on separate parts simultaneously. Stone carvers shaped massive pillars, while sculptors created thousands of figures depicting gods, dancers, and royal scenes. The walls filled with intricate carvings, telling stories from Hindu texts, each one planned to teach visitors about divine power and royal authority. The greatest challenge came with building the main tower, which would rise 66 meters high. No crane existed that could lift the enormous capstone to such heights. Kunjara Malan devised an ingenious solution. His workers built a massive earthen ramp that spiraled around the rising tower, allowing them to roll the heavy stones up gradually. As each level was completed, they raised the ramp higher. Inside the temple, artists painted elaborate murals showing court scenes, religious festivals, and stories of Chola victories. Thousands of inscriptions were carved into the walls, recording donations from the king and nobles. These records listed gifts of gold ornaments, fertile lands, cattle, and even villages dedicated to supporting the temple's daily operations. The temple required constant coordination between different specialist groups. Stoneworkers, metal craftsmen, painters, and sculptors had to time their work perfectly. Rajaraja appointed supervisors who reported directly to him, ensuring quality and speed. The king visited regularly, inspecting progress and making decisions about decorative details. Beyond its artistic beauty, the temple was designed to last forever. The architects used innovative techniques to make the structure earthquake-resistant. They fitted stones together without mortar, allowing the building to flex during tremors. The foundation went deep into solid rock, providing unshakable stability. As the 7th year approached, teams worked day and night to complete the finishing touches. Painters added final details to murals, while priests prepared for the consecration ceremonies. The temple had become more than a building. It was a small city employing dancers, singers, priests, guards, and administrators. When the last stone was placed, something unprecedented stood on the landscape. The completed temple rose like a mountain of carved granite, visible for miles across the fertile plains. Workers had transformed Rajaraja's dream into reality, creating a structure that would witness the rise and fall of empires while remaining eternal. Part 3. Consecration and Celebration. A Monarch's Offering. The year 1010 CE dawned with anticipation across the Chola Kingdom. After 7 years of tireless construction, Rajaraja's magnificent temple stood ready for its sacred awakening. The king had spent months preparing for this moment, sending invitations to rulers from Ceylon to Java, gathering the finest priests from across the Tamil lands, and assembling treasures that would astound even seasoned diplomats. The consecration began before sunrise on an auspicious day chosen by royal astrologers. Hundreds of Shaivite priests, led by the most learned scholars of the age, gathered around the towering structure. The air filled with the sound of conch shells and temple bells as sacred fires were lit in every corner of the complex. This was no ordinary temple opening. It was a celebration of imperial triumph, blessed by the gods themselves. The centerpiece of the ceremony was the installation of the massive Shiva Lingam, carved from a single block of granite and standing taller than any in existence. Teams of priests carried the sacred symbol through elaborate rituals that lasted 3 days. Chanting filled the air as thousands of devotees watched the lingam being consecrated with water from sacred rivers, milk, honey, and precious oils. When the final mantras echoed through the temple halls, witnesses knew they had seen something extraordinary. Rajaraja's generosity during the consecration became the stuff of legend. He donated entire villages to support the temple's daily operations, gifting thousands of acres of fertile land whose harvests would feed the priests and staff forever. Gold ornaments weighing several tons adorned the deity, while precious stones from across his empire decorated the inner sanctum. The king assigned 400 temple dancers, 300 musicians, and countless craftsmen to serve the divine presence permanently. Foreign dignitaries watched these proceedings with wonder and respect. Ambassadors from Southeast Asian kingdoms, Ceylon's nobility, and merchants from distant lands witnessed Chola power displayed through devotion. They saw a ruler who could command vast resources not just for war, but for creating something eternal. The message was clear. A kingdom capable of such magnificent offerings to the gods possessed strength beyond measure. The celebrations continued for weeks, with daily festivals showcasing Chola arts, music, and dance. The temple courtyards echoed with performances that would influence cultural traditions across South India for centuries. Every ritual, every offering, every ceremony reinforced the bond between divine blessing and royal authority. As the consecration period concluded, the temple had transformed from a building into a living institution. Inscriptions carved into its walls recorded every donation, every endowment, every arrangement for perpetual worship. The Brihadeeswara had become more than Rajaraja's offering to Shiva. It was now the beating heart of his empire, pumping wealth, culture, and spiritual energy through every corner of his realm. This grand celebration marked the beginning of a new chapter in Chola history, where temples would serve as centers of power, culture, and devotion for generations to come. Part 4. Cultural Renaissance. Patron of arts, literature, and ritual. The great celebration at Brihadeeswara had barely ended when Rajaraja turned his attention to an equally ambitious project. The emperor understood that power built through conquest could crumble without cultural foundations. He decided to make his court the center of a cultural flowering that would outlast any military victory. Rajaraja's first move was both practical and inspired. He ordered the collection and compilation of the Tevaram hymns, ancient Tamil devotional songs, composed by the 63 Nayanmars, the Shaivite saints who had lived centuries before. These sacred verses had been scattered across temples and monasteries, many on the verge of being lost. The king commissioned teams of scholars to travel throughout Tamil lands, gathering these precious works from palm leaf manuscripts hidden in temple archives. The compilation project revealed Rajaraja's genius as a cultural strategist. By preserving these Tamil devotional texts, he was not merely collecting old songs. He was creating a unified religious identity that connected every Tamil-speaking person to their spiritual heritage. The Tevaram would be recited in temples across his empire, creating shared rituals that bound his subjects together through common devotion. Musicians and dancers soon filled the palace courtyards. Rajaraja established a formal system of temple performers, giving royal recognition to what would later be known as Bharatanatyam. These sacred dances had existed for generations, but under Rajaraja's patronage, they became refined art forms with standardized movements and meanings. Young women trained in these arts became devadasis, temple dancers who performed during religious ceremonies. The emperor's cultural vision extended beyond Tamil traditions. His court welcomed scholars who worked in Sanskrit and Prakrit, creating a multilingual intellectual environment. Poets found generous sponsors, astronomers received royal funding for their calculations, and architects shared techniques that would influence temple building from Bengal to Java. Rajaraja personally supervised the standardization of temple rituals. He issued detailed instructions about how worship should be conducted, what prayers should be recited, and how festivals should be celebrated. These guidelines spread to every major temple in his empire, creating religious unity that strengthened political control. Foreign visitors marveled at the cultural energy of Rajaraja's court. Merchants from Southeast Asia carried home stories of Tamil poetry and dance. Buddhist monks from Sri Lanka studied alongside Hindu scholars. This cultural magnetism became a form of soft power, spreading Chola influence far beyond the reach of armies. The preservation of the Tevaram created unexpected consequences. These compilations became templates for similar projects across India, inspiring other rulers to collect and preserve their regional literatures. Rajaraja had started a movement that would reshape Indian cultural consciousness. As inscriptions multiplied across his temples and administrative efficiency improved, Rajaraja realized he had created something unprecedented, a system where religion, culture, and governance reinforced each other at every level of society. Part 5. Temples as Powerhouses: Wealth, Administration, and Influence. The temples that rose during Rajaraja's reign were far more than places of prayer. They function as the beating heart of the Chola economy, storing vast treasures and managing agricultural lands that stretched across the kingdom. Gold ornaments, precious gems, and silver vessels filled temple vaults, creating wealth reserves that rivaled royal treasuries. Temple priests maintained detailed records of every donation, every grain of rice, and every piece of land gifted by devotees. These religious centers operated sophisticated administrative systems. Temple officials collected taxes from assigned villages, supervised irrigation projects, and managed trade relationships with merchants. The Brihadeeswara temple alone controlled hundreds of villages, their produce flowing into temple granaries to feed thousands of priests, dancers, musicians, and craftsmen. Revenue from these lands funded not just daily worship, but also military expeditions and public works. Rajaraja created a system where temple endowments directly supported his armies. Wealthy devotees donated money to sponsor entire military units, with regiments bearing names like Shiva's Warriors or Protectors of the Sacred. Temple inscriptions proudly recorded these contributions, showing how religious devotion translated into military strength. When the king needed funds for a naval campaign or fortress construction, temple treasuries provided the resources. The temples also served as centers of learning and culture. Scholars gathered in temple courtyards to debate philosophy and compose poetry. Children from nearby villages learned mathematics and astronomy from temple priests. Dance and music schools trained performers who would carry Chola cultural traditions across the kingdom and beyond. These institutions preserved knowledge and transmitted it to future generations. Diplomatic functions flourished within temple walls. Foreign ambassadors witnessed elaborate festivals, observing the wealth and organizational power of the Chola state. Trade agreements were often negotiated during religious ceremonies, with merchants sealing deals under the watchful eyes of carved deities. Temple festivals became occasions for political networking, where local officials could meet royal administrators and present their concerns directly. The king bound his subjects to the state through shared participation in temple life. Farmers who contributed rice for daily offerings felt connected to something greater than their individual struggles. Merchants who funded temple construction gained social prestige and divine protection for their ventures. Even common laborers who helped maintain temple grounds became part of a larger community centered around worship and service. This integration of religion with governance created unprecedented stability. People obeyed laws, not just from fear of punishment, but from respect for a system blessed by the gods. Temple inscriptions reinforced royal authority while providing channels for subjects to express devotion and gain recognition. Through this brilliant synthesis, Rajaraja had created institutions that would outlast his dynasty and continue shaping South Indian society for centuries to come. Chapter 4: Diplomacy, Administration, and Lasting Reforms. Part 1: Strategic Alliances and Matrimony, Forging New Dynastic Bonds. Marriage had always been a weapon in the hands of kings, and Rajaraja Chola wielded it with surgical precision. As his empire stretched from Ceylon's coral coasts to the spice-laden shores of Kerala, the young emperor understood that military conquests alone could not secure lasting peace. The blood spilled on battlefields dried quickly, but the bonds forged through marriage could last generations. The most crucial move came through his daughter, Kundavai, a princess whose intelligence matched her beauty. Rajaraja saw opportunity in the fractured politics of the Deccan, where the eastern Chalukyas of Vengi struggled against their western cousins. By offering Kundavai's hand to Prince Vimaladitya of Vengi, Rajaraja transformed a distant kingdom into a loyal ally overnight. The wedding celebrations in Vengi lasted for weeks, but the real festivities happened in Rajaraja's war councils. With the eastern Chalukyas now bound by blood, the Chola Empire gained a powerful buffer against the western Chalukyas, who had long threatened the northern borders. More importantly, this alliance secured the vital coastal trade routes of Andhra, where merchant ships loaded precious goods destined for Southeast Asia. Vimaladitya proved worthy of the trust placed in him. When Western Chalukya armies threatened the eastern territories, they found not just local resistance, but Chola reinforcements arriving by sea. The marriage had created a military partnership that stretched across the peninsula, making any invasion of Chola heartlands a dangerous gamble. But Kundavai's marriage was only the beginning. Rajaraja orchestrated a web of diplomatic unions that spread Chola influence far beyond military reach. His sons and nephews married into prominent families across South India, creating networks of loyalty that gold alone could never buy. Each wedding brought new allies, new trading partners, and new sources of intelligence about potential threats. These alliances reached across the seas as well. Rajaraja forged connections with Southeast Asian kingdoms through carefully chosen marriages and diplomatic exchanges. Tamil merchants carrying Chola protection found welcome in distant ports, while foreign princes sought the prestige of Chola friendship. The emperor's reputation for honoring agreements made his word valuable currency in international trade. The strategy worked brilliantly. Instead of constant warfare draining the royal treasury, Rajaraja's diplomatic marriages created periods of stable peace. His armies could focus on expansion rather than defending existing borders. Trade flourished under these protective alliances, filling the imperial coffers with wealth that funded even grander ambitions. Years later, when challenges arose from unexpected quarters, these marriage alliances proved their worth. Sons-in-law became generals, in-laws became spies, and wedding gifts transformed into military supplies. Rajaraja had learned that the strongest fortresses were built not from stone, but from human relationships carefully nurtured across generations. This diplomatic foundation would prove essential as the emperor turned his attention to an even more ambitious project, completely reorganizing how his vast empire was governed and administered. Part 2. Administrative Genius. Survey, Taxation, and the Valanadu System. With his diplomatic web secure, Rajaraja faced the enormous challenge of governing territories that stretched from the mountains of Kerala to the ports of Sri Lanka. The emperor knew that military conquest meant nothing without proper administration. His existing system, built for a smaller kingdom, was cracking under the weight of his expanded empire. The solution came through an idea that was both simple and revolutionary. Rajaraja decided to measure everything. Beginning around 1000 CE, teams of surveyors spread across the entire empire, armed with measuring rods and record books. They walked through every village, mapping every field, counting every tree, and recording every well. This massive survey took years to complete, but it gave Rajaraja something no Indian ruler had ever possessed: exact knowledge of his empire's resources. The surveyors discovered fascinating patterns. Coastal regions produced different crops than mountain areas. Some districts had too many people for their farmland, while others sat nearly empty. Rivers created natural boundaries, but they also connected communities in unexpected ways. This information became the foundation for Rajaraja's greatest administrative innovation. He scrapped the old territorial divisions entirely and created the Valanadu system. The empire was divided into large provinces called mandalams, each governed by a trusted official. Within each mandalam sat several Valanadus, districts that followed natural boundaries like rivers and mountain ranges rather than ancient tribal territories. Each Valanadu contained multiple villages, creating a clear chain of command from the imperial palace to the smallest hamlet. This hierarchy transformed tax collection. Previously, local chiefs had collected whatever they could from farmers and sent a portion to the king. Now, every village knew exactly what they owed, and every district official knew what they should receive. Detailed records tracked every payment, making corruption much harder to hide. Farmers gained protection from arbitrary demands, while the empire enjoyed steady revenue. The temples played a crucial role in this system. Rather than creating an entirely new bureaucracy, Rajaraja used existing temple networks as administrative centers. Temple priests maintained records, distributed food during famines, and settled local disputes. This approach respected traditional authority while ensuring imperial oversight. Village assemblies gained new importance under this system. Local leaders could make decisions about irrigation and crop rotation, but they answered to district officials for tax collection and law enforcement. This balance between local autonomy and central control kept the system flexible enough to adapt to regional differences. The results were immediate. Tax revenue increased dramatically, not because rates went higher, but because the system captured wealth that had previously disappeared into private pockets. Trade flourished as merchants could predict costs and taxes along their routes. Farmers invested in better tools and techniques, knowing their efforts would be rewarded rather than confiscated. This administrative revolution created the framework that would support the Chola Empire for generations. But Rajaraja understood that good government required more than efficient taxation. His next challenge was integrating his diverse conquests into a unified imperial culture. Part 3. Integration of conquests, provincial capitals, and lasting control. Rajaraja faced a problem that had destroyed many conquerors before him. He now ruled lands stretching from the Tungabhadra River to the tip of Sri Lanka, from the Kerala backwaters to distant islands in Southeast Asia. Each region spoke different languages, followed different customs, and worshipped different gods. Simply collecting taxes was not enough. He needed these diverse territories to become genuinely Chola, not merely occupied lands waiting to rebel. The king's solution was both practical and brilliant. In every major conquest, he established provincial capitals that served as miniature versions of Tanjavur. These cities became centers of Chola power, complete with royal palaces, magnificent temples, and strong military garrisons. The palace housed the governor and his administrative staff. The temple displayed Chola religious authority and cultural values. The garrison ensured that local rebellions would be crushed quickly. Rajaraja carefully selected his governors from two groups he could trust completely. Many were his own relatives, princes and cousins who shared his bloodline and understood his vision. Others were generals who had proven their loyalty through years of successful campaigns. These men received clear instructions: maintain order, collect revenues, and gradually transform their provinces into loyal Chola territories. Sri Lanka presented the greatest challenge. The Sinhalese population had fought fiercely against Chola invasion and continued to resist occupation. Rajaraja's governor there, his trusted general Arulmozhi, established his headquarters at Polonnaruwa and began a systematic process of integration. Tamil settlers received land grants to establish communities alongside Sinhalese villages. New temples built in the Chola style created focal points for cultural transformation. Local chiefs who submitted peacefully kept their positions, but under Chola oversight. Kerala required a different approach. The region's wealth came from spice trade and its complex network of waterways. Rather than replacing local systems entirely, Rajaraja's governors worked with existing merchant families and port administrators. They introduced Chola commercial practices while respecting local trading customs. New temples honored both Tamil deities and Kerala's traditional gods, creating religious bridges between cultures. The integration model proved remarkably effective. Within a decade, former battlegrounds had become productive provinces, contributing wealth and soldiers to the empire. Local populations began adopting Tamil script for official documents while keeping their native languages for daily use. Intermarriage between Tamil administrators and local families created bonds that went beyond political necessity. Most importantly, Rajaraja's provincial system created career opportunities for talented individuals regardless of their origin. Sinhalese administrators who proved competent could advance within the Chola bureaucracy. Kerala merchants who demonstrated loyalty gained access to trade networks spanning the Indian Ocean. This meritocratic approach transformed potential enemies into stakeholders in Chola success. The empire's far-flung territories remained connected through regular communication networks. Governors sent detailed reports to Tanjavur describing local conditions, revenue collections, and potential problems. Royal inspectors traveled circuits to verify these reports and ensure standards remained high. This system created accountability while maintaining central control. By the end of Rajaraja's reign, his integration model had created something unprecedented: a maritime empire held together not just by military force, but by shared administrative culture and economic opportunity. The foundation was now solid enough to support the even greater ambitions of his successors. Yet Rajaraja understood that lasting unity required more than efficient government and loyal governors. True imperial strength demanded religious harmony among his diverse subjects, a challenge that would test his wisdom as much as his administrative genius. Part 4. Upholding Dharma, Religious Reforms and Legacy of Tolerance. Rajaraja recognized that his vast empire, stretching from the southern tip of India to the northern reaches of Sri Lanka and across the seas to Southeast Asia, contained people who worshipped different gods in different ways. The emperor himself was a devoted follower of Shiva, spending hours in prayer at the great Brihadeeswara temple he had built in Thanjavur. Yet he understood that forcing his religious beliefs on millions of subjects would breed resentment and rebellion. His approach was both pragmatic and genuinely inclusive. While continuing to build magnificent Shiva temples that served as symbols of Chola power, Rajaraja simultaneously supported Vishnu temples throughout his realm. In the Tamil heartland, he renovated ancient Vishnu shrines that had fallen into disrepair, ensuring that devotees of the preserver god felt equally valued. His inscriptions record substantial grants to both Shaivite and Vaishnavite institutions, treating them with equal reverence in official documents. The emperor's tolerance extended far beyond the boundaries of Hinduism. Buddhist monasteries, which had been centers of learning and culture for centuries, received royal patronage. In regions like Sri Lanka, where Buddhism had deep roots, Rajaraja actively supported monastic communities. This wasn't merely political calculation. The emperor understood that these institutions preserved knowledge, provided education, and served as bridges between different communities within his empire. Jain communities, particularly influential in trade networks that connected his empire to distant markets, also benefited from royal support. Rajaraja funded the construction and maintenance of Jain temples, recognizing that merchants and traders who followed this ancient faith were vital to his empire's economic prosperity. Their business connections stretched across India and beyond, making their goodwill essential for maintaining trade relationships. Perhaps most remarkably, Rajaraja developed a system for incorporating local deities and traditions into the broader framework of his state religion. When the Cholas conquered new territories, they didn't demand that local gods be abandoned. Instead, these regional deities were often identified with major Hindu gods or given honored places in temple complexes. This approach allowed conquered peoples to maintain their spiritual connections while gradually integrating them into the Chola religious and cultural system. The emperor promoted pilgrimage routes that connected temples across his empire, encouraging people from different regions to visit sacred sites throughout Chola territory. Pilgrims from Tamil Nadu would journey to temples in Kerala or Sri Lanka, while devotees from conquered territories would travel to Thanjavur. These movements of people created cultural exchange and helped build a sense of shared identity across the diverse empire. This religious policy proved as effective as any military strategy. By respecting local traditions while gradually building connections between different communities, Rajaraja created genuine loyalty rather than mere submission. His subjects saw him not as a foreign conqueror imposing alien beliefs, but as a righteous ruler who honored their spiritual needs while maintaining cosmic order. Chapter 5: The Twilight, Succession, Legacy, and the Chola World. Part 1: Climax and Transition. The End of Rajaraja's Reign. By 1010 CE, Rajaraja Chola had become something most conquerors never achieve: a ruler who knew when to stop fighting. The great Sea King, now in his 50s, faced a choice that had destroyed many empires before his. He could continue expanding, pushing his armies into new territories until they stretched too thin. Or he could step back and build something that would last beyond his own lifetime. Rajaraja chose wisdom over glory. His final years revealed a different kind of strength: the ability to consolidate rather than conquer. The man who had spent decades on battlefields now devoted himself to ensuring his empire would survive without him. This shift marked one of the most crucial transitions in South Indian history, though it happened quietly in palace chambers rather than on dramatic battlefields. The aging king's first priority became securing his succession. Unlike many medieval rulers who left succession unclear, Rajaraja methodically prepared his son Rajendra Chola for power. He brought Rajendra into military campaigns, taught him the intricacies of naval warfare, and introduced him to the complex web of alliances that held the empire together. Father and son worked side by side, with Rajaraja gradually transferring responsibilities while maintaining ultimate authority. During these final years, Rajaraja focused intensely on preserving the empire's wealth. The tribute flowing from conquered territories, the profits from Indian Ocean trade, and the temple donations all needed careful management. He established systems to ensure this wealth would fund future military campaigns and support the massive administrative structure he had created. Treasury management became as important as battlefield tactics. Military readiness remained paramount, even in peacetime. Rajaraja maintained his naval forces at full strength, knowing that sea power required constant attention. Ships needed repairs, sailors needed training, and coastal fortifications needed updates. He understood that showing weakness, even momentarily, could invite challenges from ambitious neighbors or distant enemies. The king's attention to detail extended to every aspect of governance. He spent time reviewing administrative appointments, ensuring capable officials managed distant provinces. Temple construction continued, not just for religious reasons, but to maintain the economic networks these institutions created. Each temple meant jobs, trade connections, and local loyalty to the Chola crown. In 1014 CE, Rajaraja Chola died peacefully in his palace, a remarkably rare end for a warrior king of his era. Most rulers of his time met violent deaths in battle, palace coups, or assassinations. His natural death spoke to the stability he had created and the respect he commanded from all levels of society. His peaceful passing marked more than the end of a reign. It represented the successful transition from an age of conquest to an age of consolidation. The empire Rajaraja left behind was not just vast territories on a map, but a functioning system ready for new challenges. His son Rajendra inherited not merely lands and titles, but a military machine, administrative network, and economic foundation that would enable even greater achievements. The Sea King's final victory was ensuring his empire would outlive him. Part 2. Rajendra Chola's Dawn, Expansion into Southeast Asia. When Rajendra Chola took the throne in 1014 CE, he held far more than his father's crown. The military machine Rajaraja had built hummed with precision and readiness. Veterans who had conquered Sri Lanka and the Pandyas now served as commanders. The naval arsenal at Thanjavur overflowed with warships and experienced sailors. Most importantly, the administrative network his father created could handle expansion without breaking under strain. Rajendra's eyes turned toward the distant Spice Islands of Southeast Asia. The powerful Srivijaya Empire controlled the crucial Malacca Strait, taxing every ship that passed through with Indian Ocean goods. Rajaraja had established diplomatic contacts with these kingdoms during his reign, learning their strengths and weaknesses. His spies had mapped their ports and studied their defenses. This groundwork proved invaluable when Rajendra decided to act. The economic foundation made such distant campaigns possible. Temple treasuries held vast reserves of gold and silver. The efficient tax system generated steady revenue streams. Agricultural improvements had created food surpluses that could supply long overseas expeditions. Rajaraja's economic planning had built a war chest specifically for such ambitious ventures. In 1025 CE, Rajendra launched his famous Southeast Asian expedition. Chola fleets sailed from ports his father had developed, carrying soldiers trained in his father's methods. They struck at Kedah, Palembang, and other Srivijaya strongholds with devastating effectiveness. The naval tactics Rajaraja had perfected against Ceylon proved equally successful in Malayan waters. The political network Rajaraja established through marriages and alliances provided crucial support. Local rulers who had signed treaties with the previous king now offered supplies and intelligence to his son. The diplomatic groundwork made Rajendra's forces welcome in some ports, while isolating their enemies in others. Within months, Srivijaya's power crumbled. Chola armies captured King Sangrama Vijayatunga Varman and seized massive quantities of treasure. They established Chola trading posts across Southeast Asia, extending their commercial reach far beyond anything Rajaraja had imagined possible. This victory transformed the Indian Ocean into a Chola lake. Ships flying the Tiger Banner controlled trade routes from the Arabian Sea to the South China Sea. The wealth flowing back to Tamil lands dwarfed even the riches Rajaraja had accumulated. Temples built with Southeast Asian gold rose across the Chola heartland. Rajendra's success proved the wisdom of his father's long-term vision. Every institution Rajaraja had created contributed to this triumph. The administrative system managed distant conquests. The navy projected power across vast oceans. The economic foundation supported extended campaigns. The diplomatic network provided essential local support. The Sea King's greatest achievement was not just building an empire, but creating the tools that allowed it to grow beyond his wildest dreams. His son's victories in Southeast Asia were the direct result of foundations laid during Rajaraja's reign. Part 3. Enduring Institutions, Temples, Navy, and Administrative Structures. The true measure of Rajaraja's genius lay not in his conquests, but in what survived them. While other empires crumbled with their founders, the Sea King's institutions proved remarkably durable. His successors inherited functioning systems that could adapt and evolve, rather than mere territories to defend. The Chola Navy remained the Indian Ocean's dominant force for 2 centuries after Rajaraja's death. Later kings expanded the fleet's reach further east, but they built upon his original design. Harbor cities like Nagapattinam continued serving as naval headquarters. The same shipyards that built Rajaraja's vessels produced war fleets for his great-grandsons. Coastal communities that first served the Sea King maintained their maritime traditions across generations. Temple economies proved equally enduring. The Brihadeeswara temple's inscription system became the template for documenting land grants throughout the empire. Other Chola rulers followed Rajaraja's model of funding temples through conquered wealth. These religious centers continued operating banks, schools, and hospitals long after the empire's political decline. Village assemblies recorded their decisions in stone, preserving the administrative practices Rajaraja had standardized. The provincial system showed remarkable flexibility. Later Chola kings faced different challenges than Rajaraja, including pressure from rising powers like the Chalukyas and Pandyas. Yet they successfully adapted his administrative framework. Provincial governors learned to balance local autonomy with central authority. The revenue collection system adjusted to changing economic conditions while maintaining its basic structure. Cultural institutions displayed the greatest staying power. Tamil literature flourished under Rajaraja's patronage and continued growing for centuries. Poets composed verses praising later kings, using the same literary forms the Sea King had encouraged. Temple festivals established during his reign became annual traditions that survived political upheavals. Bronze sculptors refined techniques pioneered in Rajaraja's workshops. The diplomatic network evolved into a sophisticated system of international relations. Chola ambassadors maintained connections with Southeast Asian kingdoms established during Rajendra's campaigns. Trade agreements negotiated during Rajaraja's reign provided frameworks for commercial expansion. The reputation for honoring treaties that the Sea King cultivated served his successors well in foreign courts. These institutions succeeded because Rajaraja had built them to be systems rather than personal projects. He created structures that functioned independently of individual rulers. Provincial administrators could make local decisions within established guidelines. Naval commanders operated according to proven tactical principles. Temple priests followed documented rituals and procedures. The Sea King's greatest insight was understanding that lasting power required transferable institutions. He designed systems that could survive succession crises, military defeats, and economic difficulties. Each institution reinforced the others, creating networks of mutual support that strengthened over time. By 1200 CE, nearly 2 centuries after Rajaraja's death, modified versions of his institutions still governed much of South India. The political boundaries had shifted, but the administrative culture he established remained recognizable. This institutional continuity would prove crucial as the Chola world faced its greatest challenges from northern invasions and internal rebellions. Part 4. The Long Legacy: Cultural, Economic, and Global Impact. When European traders arrived along India's coast centuries later, they discovered something remarkable. From the ports of Tamil Nadu to the temples of Java, they found echoes of the same architectural styles, similar trade practices, and shared religious traditions. This was not coincidence, but the lasting footprint of Rajaraja's vision, carried forward by generations who built upon his foundations. The Sea King's influence spread far beyond his political borders, through the merchants, priests, and craftsmen who traveled his trade routes. Tamil bronze casting techniques appeared in Cambodian workshops. Temple architecture that began at Thanjavur inspired the grand structures of Angkor and Bagan. The administrative systems Rajaraja perfected became templates for kingdoms across Southeast Asia, where local rulers adapted Chola methods to govern their own territories. Trade networks established during his reign continued operating for centuries after the Chola navy faded from the seas. The monsoon routes connecting South India to Southeast Asia carried more than goods. They transported ideas, art forms, and cultural practices that took root in distant lands. Tamil inscriptions found in Indonesian temples today still record the names of South Indian merchants who settled there, following paths first secured by Rajaraja's fleets. The temple economy he created proved remarkably durable. Long after political power shifted to other dynasties, these religious institutions continued functioning as banks, schools, and cultural centers. They preserved Tamil literature, supported classical arts, and maintained the scholarly traditions that kept South Indian civilization vibrant through periods of political upheaval. Perhaps most significantly, the Sea King's reign established South India as a major player in global maritime trade. The wealth and connections forged during his era positioned the region to remain economically important even as European colonial powers entered the Indian Ocean. The trading skills, maritime knowledge, and international networks his policies fostered helped South Indian communities adapt to changing economic conditions across centuries. The cultural impact proved equally lasting. Tamil Hindu traditions that spread during the Chola expansion took deep root in Southeast Asia. Temple festivals, classical dance forms, and religious practices that began in Rajaraja's domains continue today in Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. These cultural bridges created bonds between South India and Southeast Asia that survived the rise and fall of multiple empires. By the time the last Chola rulers lost political control in the 13th century, their cultural and economic influence had become woven into the fabric of the entire Indian Ocean region. Trade routes, religious practices, architectural styles, and administrative methods pioneered during the Sea King's era had created connections that transcended political boundaries. This was Rajaraja's true achievement, building not just an empire, but a civilization whose influence would outlast any kingdom. Part 5. Memory and Myth. Rajaraja in Historical Imagination. When Rajaraja Chola died in 1014 CE, something remarkable began to happen. His story started growing beyond the facts carved in stone inscriptions and recorded in palm leaf manuscripts. The Sea King's deeds began traveling through Tamil villages and royal courts alike, told and retold until they took on the glow of legend. The temple priests at Thanjavur were among the first storytellers. As pilgrims arrived from across the empire to worship at the great Rajarajeshwaram temple, the priests would recount tales of the king who built this magnificent structure. They spoke of his devotion to Shiva, his generosity to the temple, and his victories that brought wealth to honor the gods. These stories, repeated countless times, began to shape how people remembered their departed ruler. Court poets and scholars took up the tale with even greater enthusiasm. They crafted verses that described Rajaraja as the perfect king, brave in battle, wise in governance, and devoted to the divine. These poems traveled beyond the Chola realm, carried by merchants and diplomats who spread stories of the Sea King's golden age throughout South India and Southeast Asia. The stone inscriptions themselves became part of this growing mythology. Later generations would visit the temples Rajaraja built and read accounts of his conquests carved into the walls. But over time, these factual records began to merge with folklore. People added details that weren't in the original inscriptions, creating a richer, more colorful version of the king's life. Tamil literature embraced Rajaraja as the ideal ruler. Writers used his reign as a model when describing fictional kings or criticizing contemporary rulers who fell short of his standard. His name became synonymous with justice, military prowess, and cultural flourishing. Stories emerged of his wisdom in settling disputes, his courage in leading troops, and his vision in building monuments that would last forever. Temple art played a crucial role in preserving his memory. Bronze sculptures and stone carvings depicted scenes from his reign, showing the king in various roles, as warrior, as patron of the arts, as devotee of Shiva. These visual stories reached even those who couldn't read the inscriptions, spreading his legend to every level of society. Folk songs began celebrating the Sea King's deeds. Traveling musicians carried these ballads from village to village, singing of his naval victories and his grand temples. Each performance added new flourishes to the story, as singers adapted the tales to please their audiences. By the time the Chola Empire finally faded centuries later, Rajaraja had transformed from a historical king into something far greater, a symbol of Tamil greatness and cultural pride. His reign represented a time when South Indian power stretched across the seas, when magnificent temples rose from the earth, and when Tamil civilization reached its peak. This mythical Rajaraja would inspire future generations of rulers, poets, and dreamers who looked back to his era as a golden age that might one day return.